And welcome back, college hockey fans, to a very special episode of MNCAA. I am your host, Nick Maxson, and joining me from the depths of the Twin Cities is a Gopher great and broadcaster, Pat Micheletti, joins us this afternoon. Pat, how you doing, my friend?
Good, Nick. Always good to catch up with you and follow all your stuff, and it's been great.
Pat, the college hockey season is well underway, and I know that both of us in the broadcast world, it's hard to catch a break sometimes because you've been busy. You've been doing some Gopher games, some Augustana stuff as well. Tell the folks what you've been up to.
Yeah, it's just it's whoever calls, I go. And no, it's it's been good to get back with the Gophers, obviously, on the TV side. And, I just been doing a lot of that and a lot of wild stuff. And so my schedule is busy, to say the least.
It never ends, right, Pat? It's 0 to 100 from essentially September all the way through April.
Yep.
It's crazy. Yep. Not to steal a quote from PA, but thank you to McTalkick for joining me this afternoon. Speaking of Gophers, I think what a great place to start. Gophers are essentially one of the better teams in Minnesota in terms of college Division I. Although if you ask some Gophers fans, maybe not so much. They're 6-4-2. We're going to use the P word. We're not going to get too much weight to it, but 12th in the pairwise. But Pat, you've done some of their games. Tell me what you have noticed or have observed with the Gophers so far this season.
Well, I said last year, and a lot of people called me crazy, that I thought that they could have a better team this year. And you say that, and you lose 5 guys to the National Hockey League. But that being said, they're still a team trying to find themselves, and certain players on that team are trying to get to the point where they understand what their role is now, because you go from being one of the guys that is a helper, if you will, to now the key, they're driving the car. And that's a big transition for anybody. I go back to when I was playing, Nick. I came in with a pretty heralded freshman group, and none of us were really expected to carry the mail. We were the secondary guys behind Scott Bukestead, Butsy Erickson, Steve Griffith. I could go on and on. We had a pretty good team, and then all of a sudden, those guys leave, and you're given the keys to the car, and all of a sudden, you have to realize that you have to be good every night. If you're one of the guys that is carrying the mail, well, you got to carry it every game, and that was difficult for me at first, and some of my other teammates who were also put in that role. And it takes time. It comes eventually. It doesn't happen overnight. And so I think a few of the guys on Minnesota are going through that now. They're a deep team. They've got very good goaltending. They're very strong up the middle. They have guys who can produce offensively. It's just getting to that point where they've got to do it every shift, and they've had lapses in games that, quite frankly, have hurt them. So I'd be better judging them in January and telling you where they are, because I think by that point, along with Minnesota, there'll be a lot of teams that we can say, yep, that team has a chance to make a run. This team's a year away. This team is, not going to do it. So it's still, mid-November, end of November, and there's still time to figure all that out.
There's still plenty of time. And Pat, I kind of wanted to get your take on the Logan Cooley departure. Now, there was a lot of talk made about the timing of it. Now, granted, when you and I have talked in the past, and I think all NHL bound talent would agree with this, is that when you get the call, you just got to go, right? Sometimes it just doesn't matter when it comes. Granted, there's some talk about circumstances behind the scenes here and there. I'm not sure if that really matters, but what's sort of your take when you said that Logan Cooley signed his entry-level deal with the Coyotes and looks to be actually having a pretty good start to his NHL career?
Well, I think the turning point came because I fully believed, and I think, and in even talking to Logan, all indications were he was coming back, and then he went to developmental camp, and he was by far not even close their best player, and he and at that point, and even though you're not playing with the older guys, at that point he was so heads and tails above everybody else there that Arizona said, there's a spot for you. And then with Fantilli winning the Hobie and Fantilli signing the deal, there's a competitive rage inside of Logan Cooley that he wants to be better than Fantilli. He wants to be better than Bedard, and he wants to go head to head with him from the get-go. And so I think a lot of those factors played a part in it. And he looks like he belongs, and from what we've seen so far.
I would agree with that. Looks comfortable, and what a rookie race it's turned out to be for the Calder this year. It's actually going to be quite a fun for a lot of players, not just Bedard, but as you mentioned, Fantilli, Logan Cooley, just name a couple that could be in that race. So kind of going back to the Gophers, right? We mentioned this team is talented, and it's no doubt this team talented, but where folks have drawn some eye in terms of maybe a spot that there has been some growing pains has been in the defensive core. Now, we've paid a lot of attention to the offensive ranks, the talent that's up front, and that's still there without a doubt, even with Logan Cooley going pro. But where I think maybe some folks have said is, wait a second, let's not forget they had Brock Faber. They had a lot of great players in the defensive and that also went pro. Do you think that's also part of maybe why this team is having some nights here, nights there, where it's not necessarily consistent right now?
I can answer it this way. You had three guys that left that are playing in the NHL. And what those three possessed, this group does a little bit differently. So they're not going to be the same, right? Brock Faber, elite skater. Jackson Lacombe, elite skater. Ryan Johnson, elite skater. All were able to join the offense. This group plays more of a station to station. Okay. They don't join the rush as much. I think it will progress as the season goes along. But then again, you've got Luke Middlestead, who I think will be an All-American defenseman this year. I think he's that good, and he's been that good. You will see his offensive game improve as we move along. Ryan Chesley, who I thought last year, and again, in one of those secondary roles, didn't feel any pressure, didn't have to, can skate like the wind. He's played a little differently this year. He's been handed the keys. He's going to play 20-odd minutes a night. And so I think he is trying to digest that. And I think we're starting to see it a little bit more. He got a little bit more offensive last weekend. Beautiful goal against Notre Dame. In fact, a winning goal. And so I think by January, we're going to see a different Ryan Chesley. Sam Renzel is going to be an all-star. I mean, the kid is 6'4", 215 pounds, can skate like the wind, can handle the puck. Every game he is getting better. So I preach patience to the D-core that they have. Then, Mike Kester, just returned from injury, so he's finding his legs. Good to have that veteran back there.
100%.
So I think they're different. They're not last year's group, but when you break it all down and when you see what they can become, I think there's good a group as there is in the country.
And Pat, with being sixth in the Big Ten, right? This is a much different Big Ten race than we saw last year, right? Almost turned upside down. I kind of want to ask you a little bit about the Big Ten as a whole.
Yep.
Holy cow, Wisconsin.
Yep.
I'm not as surprised as some people are. I'm curious as to see if you thought that Wisconsin could turn it around this quick under a coach that we have high praise for, which is Mike Hastings.
I knew that they would be, I knew what they had coming back, and I knew the guys that he brought in the transfer portal. I was and still am a little bit leery of their goaltender, and a little bit leery of their defense is better than I thought it would be. And then you add in the way Mike Hastings coaches, and how structurally defined they are, and they've been buying into it. And as long as they continue to buy into it, they're going to be a headache for a lot of teams in college hockey this year. I don't know. We have to see how this all plays out, right? They got off to a hot start, 9-1. Then they lose a couple to Michigan State last weekend on the road. But they're good. They play hard. Can they perform like that throughout the year? We'll see. But I think they're certainly a top 4 team.
They're a pleasant surprise. And I know that to a program that, even though to us here in Minnesota, we, are more used to those very intense, close battle royales between these two squads. I think it's better for the game if Wisconsin's at where it's at. It's much better to watch.
It's great for college hockey when Wisconsin is ultra competitive, and they are. So it'll be fun to continue to watch that program grow.
Really, really fun. Already showing it so far.
Yep.
Pat, let's head a little bit further north, up I-94 to a spot that you and I spent a lot of time with. That's St. Cloud.
Yeah.
You talk about a team with essentially 2 different storylines. Non-conference, which normally has been a very strong for the Huskies, was anything but at 2-4 this year. Then they get to NCHC conference. A lot of questions surrounding the team. They've won 6 straight. Now, granted, it's been against a couple of opponents that haven't had a great start, such as Miami, UMD, which I thought was one hell of a battle last weekend myself. Your thoughts on the Huskies season, which has been, shall we say, a seesaw so far early?
Well, I tell you what, first off, I think Brett Larson's one of the best coaches in college hockey. And so they have that going for him. And when they have that going for him, he is able to take a player and put him in a spot where that player is going to succeed. And if the player is not doing what he is told, he will see the bench for a little while. But he has a very good way of getting his point across to his players. And it amazes me, because I look at listen, as you know, I've seen a lot of the St. Cloud teams in the past. This team does not have the talent that some of those teams had in the past. They don't have, they're not 3 lines deep. They aren't 6 defense deep. The goaltending, it quite frankly is up and down. Pretty good right now. So that's good. But in the past, it's been pretty stable. And so what they've been able to do is buy in and win. And with each win, I don't care who it's against, it gains confidence. And so you start believing you're going to win. You don't go in hoping to win. You go in expecting to win. And when you have that type of attitude, things are more often than not go your way. And so he's got them playing really well, and they're in a great spot now to start the NCHC 6-0 in that league. The rest of the league is chasing, and so good for him, good for them.
Yeah, and I will admit, Pat, when I was preparing to have the mentor conference play, I was not confident. Again, being swept against Minnesota State, and then they defeat a very tough Western Michigan team
Yep.
in Lawson, which is
Ooh,
something,
difficult.
yeah, very difficult. In fact, they hadn't won a game since
No.
2019 in
Right.
that building, and granted, one of the best atmospheres in college hockey in terms of even
Yep.
an opposing fan. It's just a very great atmosphere. So more of a kudos to Lawson than anything, those lunatics. But one thing that you talk about consistency is, how about Vidi Miettinen, the flying Finn, right? 9 goals on the season. He leads the squad there. This is vintage Vidi. When he burst on the scene a couple of years ago during the pod season, I think 12 goals his freshman year,
Yep.
and nobody could stop him. It seems like he's found that form again. But more so, Pat, it seems like he's getting better in some of those areas that we were kind of criticizing him in. That is in traffic. He was a player that loved to be in space. He seems to be finding a way to get things through, even with a lot of traffic that's around him. What have you seen from Vidi?
Well, what I see in him, he tried to be the same player his second year, but guess what? Other coaches, players, they figure people out. So every year as a player, you have to grow. And what does that mean? Well, you have to add more to your arsenal or difference, or, listen, he has one of the quickest releases in college hockey. And I think his sophomore year, he tried to do a little bit too much, tried to get a little too fancy instead of getting the puck where he, in those shooting areas and ripping it. Because when he did, it was like, wow. You just go, wow. It on his stick, off his stick, back of the net. And so I think I think he learned from that, and his game is growing and developing. And he's been, listen, if that team's going to go, he's got to be one of the guys that's leading the way. And same thing with Minnesota and Snuggerud and Lamb and Nelson and guys like that. You've got your go-to guys have to produce for you, and he is so far for them.
He certainly has. And, when we talk about this point in the season, Pat, sometimes you have these breakout players.
Yep.
Joey Molinar,
Yeah.
7 goals. And mind you, as in contrast to Vidi, these are greasy rebound, goal muff type goals. St. Cloud has been missing this essentially since their 2021 national championship run. So to me, it's not just that Joey Molinar is scoring 7 goals, which I believe already is a career high. It's more of how he's scoring them, right?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing with Joey, and I've loved Joey since day one, because he always makes the right play. He always now he's not the fleetest of foot, but then again, he's a big guy. So there's another guy, Nick, who has kind of figured it out. I'm big, I'm strong, I can manhandle guys, those D-men in front of the net. I can get to the slots. I can work down low. I can be near the net. You do not score unless you are near the net. And the majority of the goals are scored from 5 feet out. And he's figuring that out, and he's got 7. Don't change a thing. You still have to do your other parts of what Brett wants him to get done. And, but I tell you what, you keep feeding a guy that's hot, and I'm happy for him. He's wearing a letter. He's showing some leadership and growth and maturity. And that's exactly what you need from your older guys.
And this was certainly what Brett Larson and St. Cloud saw in him when they recruited him, years ago. And
he's got a great stick too. He's got really good hands. I mean, most big guys, chop the puck up a little bit, and not this kid. He's got really good hands.
Silky mitts, as they say, right, Pat?
Yeah.
Now, mind you, we have to contrast this. If there's one area for the Huskies that's been a bit of a question mark, you mentioned goaltending. Mind you, for years it was the David Rennick show, right?
Yep.
Last year, Jackson Castor.
Yeah.
And then this year it's been the Dominic Bassi show. Early on, their goaltending, let's just say, has been a bit shaky at times. Is this potentially the one Achilles heel for this St. Cloud State team as they go throughout the season? What do you even notice with their goaltending?
Well, when it comes to goaltending, it's always, I always have a caveat there, because sometimes the goaltender is a product of the system. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I'd have to go back and look at the goals, right? And say, you know what? You got hung out to dry there. You know what? You got to make that save. And there's probably a little bit of both. So is it the Achilles heel? Well, it could be. Is it the way that they are defending? Well, it could be that too. So I always, it's really simple to blame the one guy, right? But you could blame 6 guys that are out on the ice: the goaltender, your D, and your 3 forwards. And so, it's kind of a combination of things. And you just, as a goaltender, you don't want to give up a bad goal, because, that affects everybody. And you want to make that big save that pumps everybody up and gets everybody going. So, it's hard for me to say if that is going to be the Achilles heel, because listen, you've seen him. He's played great at times. So, they hope that he can continue that.
He's 6'6". He's a big goaltender. So let's just say I'm not scoring on him, because his shoulders are already at the crossbar, even in the butterfly position. Right. So he covers a lot of net, even when he's in that stance, Pat.
Yeah.
Let's continue down the line. I know Alex would be happy about this next team. That's the Mavericks, Minnesota State. Speaking of curious surprises, right, Pat? A lot of chatter around Minnesota State, especially after we talked about before, Mike Hastings going to Wisconsin, actually taking some of the roster with him. But Luke Strand comes in, and I think we need to give Luke Strand some compliments, because not only has this team held its own, but they're doing a lot in the recruiting space too. Pat, your thoughts already in the very young Luke Strand era with the Mavericks?
Well, Luke's a good coach, number one. And he had the number 1 penalty kill in college hockey last year at Ohio State, and he was responsible for that. I think they got off to a good start. They are playing well, and they're carrying a chip on their shoulder. They were picked to finish 6th in the CCHA. They lose a lot of guys. They can rally around that. They can rally around the new coach, and it's a makeover. And so, they're playing hard, and, they're going to be right there at the end, fighting for that CCHA title. I think the CCHA as a whole is down this year a little bit. So even though they lost a lot, they're fighting, and they're playing hard, and they're winning some games. So you tip your hat to them, and they still get the good crowds. It's still a tough place to play. And, I think they're going to be just fine.
Yeah, and watching with Minnesota State, now granted, probably should have raced this last weekend. What a back and forth there was between them and Bemidji State. Yeah. Whoa. Pat, what was the bigger surprise, that Minnesota State gave up I think at one point, a 3-goal lead, or that Bemidji State scored 7 against the Mavericks?
I think they're both shocked, right? I mean,
yeah.
When I saw, I think 6 in the first period or whatever it was, I was just like, whoa, what's going on here? But sometimes the game develops like that, right? Mm-hmm. And okay, they score 1, well, we got to get 1 back, or they score 2, we got to get 3, and that's how the game kind of goes. And that's what's great about this game, is that it can change in a millisecond, from one team to the other team, to a defensive game, to an offensive game. To your power play not working, to all of a sudden you get 4 power play goals, or whatever the case may be. That's what's great about our game, and that's how the game kind of set out on Saturday.
Yeah, very strange. One guy that's leading the charge offensively for the Mavs is Sam Morton. He's got 10 goals, 13 points. 5-on-5, they're actually holding their own. Power play struggling a little bit at 15%. Pat, you've played obviously at a very high level. As we go through the season, as we know, it's still early, right? Yes, we're in mid-November, but the book is still out on a lot of these squads, even those who are playing well or vice versa. But really for, the Mavericks, for the power play, special teams becomes more important as the year goes around. Your confidence leveled up, they'll be able to kind of shore up some things on the special teams, because from what I've seen, it's not just the Mavs, but throughout really the CCHA, the special teams are, shall we say, night and day for some squads.
Yeah, well, you don't have the skill level that you do per se in other leagues, so they play differently. But when you get to the playoffs, that one power play goal, that one shorthanded goal, that one penalty kill decides who wins the championship.
100%.
And so, listen, I all these teams work on it. I think specialty teams are pretty cyclical throughout. You always want to have a good penalty kill and stop your opponent and be able to connect at least at a minimum a 20% rate on the power play. In some leagues it's, you better be at 25, 30, or else you're going to lose a lot. And that just comes down to skill level. So obviously, you see it, and you see it now, again, Nick, we're talking November, where you're still trying to find the right pieces. You're still trying to find what works, what is in sync with the players that you have, and try to make it work. So again, I think we'll see better numbers in January.
I think so too. And I think Minnesota State too, we just all the turnover, right? It's so hard to develop that chemistry. And that's, I know for you and I played the game. It wasn't at a very high level, but you did. There's something to be said about, not just skill level, but just knowing your line mates and knowing where they're going to be. It's almost instinctual, right? Because when you get to the Division I level, Pat, a lot of things become, I already know without even looking where my right wing is going to be, where my left wing is going to be. It happens that fast. So, is there something to be said about, just figuring things out? Because hockey, especially nowadays, is played such at a fast pace that it becomes less about thinking that process and more just, your body reacting sort of in an instinctual basis.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes you overthink the power play a little bit in terms of, listen, power play to me is you try to create 2-on-1s. You try to get 3, maybe 4 passes and then get the shot. And so, sometimes guys try to get a little bit too cute, a little bit too fine. Again, where the majority of the goals scored on the power play, from 5 feet in. So you got to get pucks to the net, and then you got to want to get there and find the puck, and then, get it back. And so, if you're doing those things on a consistent basis, eventually it's going to start to go for you. You're going to know that, player A has got it here. He's going to shoot it. I got to get there. You got to find the rebound and go from there. So sometimes I think we try to complicate things a little too much on the power play, and then the players start to complicate it, and then it gets completely out of whack. So, that's something that, that's why you play the season, to go through that and get through it and find what works.
We're halfway through the list, Pat. This team I'm excited to talk about. How about St. Thomas?
Yeah. Really?
My goodness. And granted, when we look at just this year, not bad, 6-5-1. Pairwise, it's really a non-thing for them because they can't compete for an NCAA championship for another couple of years, which I think is, in my personal opinion, kind of ridiculous that they have to wait 5 years, because they're a good hockey team, Pat, and they're fun to watch.
Yeah, they're very good. They've got they've got guys who can score that haven't scored quite at the pace that they thought. They got older this year, and they got better. They got deeper. They've got a good goaltender. I think this is a team that can fight for the McNaughton Cup. I really do. I saw them early in the year, and I tell you, they gave Minnesota everything that they could handle both nights. And Rico has done some really good things there. And brought in the right pieces and brought in guys that really want to play for them. And so I think that school is a gold mine once they get their building built. You're right in the heart of the Twin Cities with 5 professional sports teams here, for guys to do stuff. The Wild right down the road. I think it's going to be a really interesting place in a couple of years.
I would argue it's almost now, right? They're second in the CCHA. As you mentioned, the last couple of years, I mean, again, first year, they had a lot of, shall we say, Division III players. And I think Rico approached it right. In fact, it was you, Pat, that when we talked a couple of years ago that said Rico, when he came in, could have cleaned house. He could have said, hey, these D3 guys, they're not at the talent level they need to be. But he didn't take that approach. He said, you know what? We're going to work. We're going to just go with it, and we're going to grow as a group. And I think there's a lot of respect that goes around with Rico because of the way he approached that. And now, when 2 short years later, they're near the top of the CCHA. And like you said, he's got players that are coming in. He got really good transfer portal gets, such as Matthew Gleason, the former Cretin-Durham Hall kid that comes over from CC. Like I said, it's a good mix, but more so, this team is bought into their system. And they play up tempo, they skate well, and they're getting good goaltending. So, I mean, how much credit should we give Rico Blasi for such a great foundation that St. Thomas has had already in not even 3 years, Pat? It's 2.25, really.
He doesn't cheat. And what I mean by that, he knows how to build, one block at a time. And that's the approach he took. There was no pressure. There's always pressure on these guys, but he went in with a plan, and that's why he got the job. Here is how I'm going to build our program. This is what I think will work. And he stuck to it. And he didn't waver from it, didn't take a right turn or a left turn. He stayed on it, and they're building it, and they're getting some respectability. People are noticing, recruits are noticing, and that's how you build things. And he did it at Miami. He's coached an awfully long time, so he knows, the talent that he needs to be successful at. And it's been fun to watch.
It really has been fun to watch. Speaking of players that have been fun to watch, Pat, for the Tommies this year, Lucas Swalling's got 6 goals, 12 points on the season. But you mentioned goaltending. How about Aaron Trotter? Holy cow. St. Thomas, as much as you've been giving him, the much credit they deserve, still some things they're trying to figure out as well. But Aaron Trotter, you talk about the goaltender that has been able to, shall we say, keep men in or steal them a game. Aaron Trotter has been that and maybe more for the Tommies so far early.
Yeah, and they play for him, and they see him make a big save, and the next shift out, they're flying. And you mentioned Wallen. I mean, that kid, talk about. I mean, he started out in NA3 and just kept. You know what? I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to quit. I'm going to work hard every day. And Rico tells me he's the first guy at practice every day. Doesn't change his attitude every day, even if it's a bad day. He has the same attitude. And you want to talk about leadership, man. And the kid just works every shift, and it's there's a reason why he's got the points he does, but it's so much more than the points. It's his work ethic, it's his leadership, and that's how you build good teams.
Yeah, and it's such a good story too for a guy that NA3. I mean, Pat, when we talk about players in nowadays, right? When you're in junior hockey, NA3, I mean, there seems to be, and from the player's perspective, right, it's a tough mountain to climb, right?
Yeah, really.
But when you have, like you said, the commitment, the attitude, and the work ethic to say, you know what, I got to make my own luck, or I got to work hard. My time will come. And look at the position he's put himself in. I mean, it's almost like he is the perfect character guy that Rico looks for, because that's exactly how Rico's built this squad.
Great story. Absolutely great story. And great kid. And, you just, you tip that to him and cheer him on, and, good for him.
One final question on St. Thomas, Mick, is it too early to say that when St. Thomas does become NCAA tournament eligible, will they make it? I kind of feel like with the trajectory, there's a pretty good chance there.
I tell you what, if they were eligible this year, they'd have a good chance to make it. They really would. They would. And so to answer your question, yes, they keep going on the trajectory that they are, and the recruits that they're getting. Yes, they will be. They're going to be a team to follow and watch.
And speaking of ways to impress recruits or getting noticed, that's one way to do it, right? Your first year of eligibility and you making the dance. That'd be quite the storyline too.
And playing
down here in the Twin Cities
arena.
Yeah. And that's going to be one heck of a barn too, right?
It's
going to be fun to watch them.
No doubt.
Speaking of fun to watch, Bemidji State, we have 2 left on the list here, Pat. This is not the same Bemidji State team under a Sarah Torrey that we've been used to. It's a different game that they're playing this year. It's actually kind of refreshing a little bit.
Yeah, well, you know what? When you get better players and more skilled players, you can do different things, and that's where Tom Serratori is so good. Is that he recognizes that, and hey, if he's got guys that can go, he's going to let them go, and they're not gonna deviate a ton from their structure and how they like to do things, but he's got some guys that know how to play. And I thought at this point they would be a little bit ahead of where they are, even though I think they're in second place right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
first, I believe. In fact, I'm checking around. They're first in the CCA.
But they probably lost some that they felt that they probably should have had.
Probably, yep.
But every team, hey, listen, everybody's beating everybody now, so I can't figure it out. The parity in college hockey is terrific, and that's what makes the game even funner too, because I don't think there really is an elite team in college hockey this year. I think there are 4 or 5 that are really, really, really good, and then you got a second tier that are awfully good, and so that doesn't mean anybody can't beat anybody on any given night.
And with the Frozen Four in St. Paul this year, Micheletti, I'm not really sure who. I mean, like you said, there is really no favorite, and it's really anybody's race right now. More so, it's let's put ourselves in a position to be in that 16, because you never know, right? And I think it's great too for college hockey. Some folks that I've talked to say, you know what? No, I want more clarity. To me, bring on the chaos.
Yeah,
which world are you in?
Exactly. No, I think you got to earn it to get to. If you want to get there, you got to earn it, and you should earn it. There should be no easy walk there, and that's how it's going to be this year. The regionals are going to be fabulous this year. I just think so many good teams, and it's going to be fun.
It's going to be real fun. Speaking of fun for Bemidji, they've been having a lot of fun watching some of their players grow this year. How about Kyle Luft? 5 goals, 10 assists, 15 points for this kid for Bemidji. You don't see that very often. Now, Leighton Road, 8 goals on the year. He leads the team there. Another Road's going to be joining St. Cloud probably as early as possibly next year, maybe in 2. But they've got a couple of guys up front, as we talked about, that can put the puck in the back of the net. Again, this is something that we haven't historically seen from Bemidji. But, for Pat and for the Minnesota schools, how important is it that Bemidji is able to get guys with this skill set to continue to compete in what's becoming a more saturated world here in Minnesota? Because we got Augustana. Again, we talked about St. Thomas. The recruiting battles between the schools is getting even more and more tight.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's great. And listen, we don't talk a ton about Bemidji because they're in Bemidji, right? They're not St. Cloud, which is close to Minneapolis, or Mankato, or Duluth, or St. Thomas, and so they're kind of but don't forget about Bemidji. Don't forget about them, right? Because they've made it to the Frozen Four. They've made NCAA appearances, but Tom knows the type of player he can recruit, and sometimes he gets guys with a little bit more skill than he originally thought, and they're performing. So I cheer for that program day in and day out. He's a dear friend of mine, and he's done a great job over the 20 some odd years he's been there.
It's almost tough to imagine a Bemidji State team without a coach last name Saratori at this point. He's been there so long.
Exactly.
Same can be said about our last team that we're going to talk about. A little bit different, though, with Scott Sandlin, who's been up there for over 21, 22 years. It's been tough for the Bulldogs, Pat. And you know what? We hate to see it, honestly. They're 3-7-3 out of the gate. They've lost, I think, winless on their last 8. They're 7-1, excuse me. But this is tough because UMD has always been competitive, but the last couple of years, but even more this year, it just hasn't found their way. They haven't gotten the puck luck.
No, they lost one of the better players in college hockey, in my opinion, and Dominic James. The kid's a really, really good player, a leader. He does everything for them, and they lose him for the whole year. What does that do? Well, then guys get slotted differently, and I think Scott's still trying to figure out where guys are going to fit if they can handle more minutes, if they can play on the power play. They don't have the D-core that they've had in the past, and they haven't had the goaltending that haven't had in the past. And that's been kind of how they win. They win with really good defense, really good goaltending, and enough scoring. And that's hurt them. I never count out a Scott Sandlin team because they play hard and they're always difficult to beat. They're in a slump right now. I think they'll be better the second half, but you feel for them a little bit. But everybody goes through it. Every team goes through it, and just got to fight your way out of it.
And they almost did. They took St. Cloud to both nights. Were very
Minnesota hard. They played Cloud hard. The problem is they ended up on the wrong side of the ledger. And that happens. So.
And Pat, as a player, right, it sort of eats away at the confidence, right? We talk about how confidence is important, and there were 2 1-goal games against the Huskies, right? You get the sense that, as a player, right, you just need one, right, just to kind of reset. Now they're getting a bye week this week. Now, we talk about this all the time in sports, right? When things are going wrong, you want the bye week. When things are going right, you want to keep playing, right? So is this for Duluth a good reset opportunity for them? The schedule doesn't get any better. We know how the NCHC goes, but is this the right time to take a step back and maybe just breathe?
For sure. I think Scott probably gave him a couple of days off to just get their heads back together, and then you can come into practice and say, okay, time to start anew. Here's how we're going to do it. This is the way we can win games. Start buying into doing this, and let's take every excuse that we have and toss it. And that's one way. Scott's been around a long time, and so and has won national championships. He knows how to make it work, and we'll see if he can with that group.
Yeah, it's tough. You mentioned Dominic James. How about Wyatt Kaiser in the back end?
Yeah,
they lost some guys.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like you said, and we've talked about this on other episodes, is if there's one coach that can take what seems to be a puzzle and put pieces together to make it work, Scott has shown to be able to do that.
No doubt.
And in years past, he's at sometimes put an ultimatum to a squad. Hey, our game is defense. I need you to go back hard through the middle. I need you to make sure we take care of our own end. The offense will come, right? And mind you, speaking of offense, Pat, Ben Steves on the power play, is he just automatic at this point?
Yeah, I mean, he's great. So you know what? Like Molinar, get the puck to this guy on the power play because he delivers. And they just need a couple more of those guys to chip in and help out. And but they score 5 goals or 6 goals on Saturday night.
5, yeah.
So, 5. Unfortunately, they gave up one more.
6, yeah.
You fix one part, but then the other part goes down, and they have work to do, and I'm sure Scott will get it figured out.
So I'm going to put you on the spot for our last question here, Pat, and because you know how I am, right? I like to give you the toss up easy ones.
Yep.
But looking at the 6 teams here in Minnesota who are Division I, we're not in the game of, shall we say predictions or whatnot, because they're never right. But if you had to guess out of the 6, how many make it to the dance? And if there are that many, who are they?
I want to say 2.
And
I think Minnesota and St. Cloud will both make the tournament. I don't think I think you're only going to see one team out of the CCHA this year. I think they're down. I don't think you'll see 2. I think you'll see 1. Obviously, St. Thomas can't make it. UMD won't. Bemidji is my sleeper 3rd. And, that would mean they will have to win the CCHA. There's a good chance they will, but we're gonna have to wait and see. But I'll go 2, possibly 3.
And Bemidji, when they've gotten there, let's go back a couple of years to Wisconsin. They have, with the way that they play, they can surprise some teams.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. The style that they play, and if they get the goaltending that they usually do, they're a tough out.
It's an embarrassment of riches that we have here in the state of hockey, Pat. It's an embarrassment of riches, and it's great that we get to sit here and talk about it. And for me to have you come on and talk about it with us here on MNCAA, we thank you so very much here, Pat.
Anytime, Nick.
Appreciate it, my man. And for those who are watching on YouTube as well as listening, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you back next week here on MNCAA. Good night.